Alexander the Great conquered the whole of the ancient Mediterranean world, which back then people from that area just called the world, since it was all they knew, with shockingly few battlefield casualties. Alexander himself claimed that less than 700 of his men fell by the sword, although Nigel Cawthorne said the number was closer to 980. Either way, those are shocking numbers for such a lengthy and ambitious campaign. Alexander attributed his success to simply never losing a battle. But, upon digging deeper into the tactics of ancient melee warfare, it is noteworthy that most battles were won or lost based on which army turned their backs and retreated first. That is when the real casualties would stack up. In a gross oversimplification of a complex issue, Alexander's armies never lost a battle because they never turned their backs and they never retreated. They always pressed forward, posturing as if invincible, until their opponent's will to persist had been broken, and they would turn tail in fear, attempting to save themselves, only to expose their backs to imminent death. Apparently, this was a fairly common trend in ancient warfare. Most of the casualties occurred on the side of the army that attempted to retreat, only after they began to flee. That's interesting to me for a number of reasons, especially as a combat sports coach. Since it's my job to train athletes to win fights, I see some strong parallels here. The most successful submission attack in both mixed martial arts and sport jiu-jitsu is the rear naked choke. If you don't know what that is, it's strangling an opponent from behind. It's a simple technique to learn and to use. And unlike many other submission fighting techniques, the rear naked choke actually gets easier to apply when fighters get sweaty and friction is severely reduced, which happens in spades mere moments into an MMA fight under hot stage lights, if not well before through sheer nervousness, while walking through the long, dark tunnel leading to the caged animal waiting to destroy you in any way imaginable. Now, there are many ways to force, manipulate, or trick an inferior opponent into giving up their back in a fight. But finishing a highly skilled fighter with this technique requires something else. You must break him first, so that he goes on the defensive, even just for a moment. He must be attempting to escape, rather than to improve his position. There is a world of difference between the two. A common question I get from new students when teaching a method of attack that they're not familiar with is this: what's the escape from that? I shut that kind of talk down quickly. A positional improvement is a method to advance toward winning a fight. An attempt to escape is a death sentence in an arena with no exits. While in practice a man on the bottom trying to escape his adversary who is raining down punches might look quite similar to a man in the same position improving his position. The first man is significantly more likely to be beaten and strangled, while the second man is significantly more likely to win the fight himself. More than a few people who come to my gym hoping to learn a few self-defense moves are sorely disappointed when they learn what I teach is the polar opposite of self-defense. Whatever leaves you intact, alive, and safe is self-defense. An exit strategy is self-defense. Staying home, eating potato chips, and escapism via watching TV or playing video games instead of risking walking outside into the cold, cruel world is self-defense. The skills and strategies to win fights are the polar opposite of self-defense. It is quite literally becoming the aggressor within the context of a cage fight, where there will be no legal repercussions for your violent actions. To the contrary, you will be rewarded for it, That's an alien concept for most humans. It's far removed from the idea of self-preservation. The pursuit of glorious battle, the struggle for an empire, reveling in the fight itself, hand-to-hand combat for combat's sake. Normal people are like hobbits. Hobbits who are concerned about their health, comfort, and reputation. A fighter is like Bilbo Baggins, the bravest little hobbit of them all, who in spite of his comfortable circumstances signed a contract he had no business signing, chose adventure, and in spite of himself and all his shortcomings, rose to the occasion. And not only did the things others were too afraid to do, but more importantly, acted contrary to his own fears, delving straight into the long corridors leading to the dragon's den, completely and utterly alone. I've been reading J.R.R. Tolkien's books, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, to my children. I've read these books many times over the years. The first time they were entertaining stories. But now, reading them as a retired fighter and combat sports coach, I see many parallels. These are stories of unlikely heroes, small and weak and simple hobbits, with no expectations of heroism or courage. At the surface level, The Hobbit is a story of an adventure, a long journey whose end is to defeat an evil dragon, Smaug, and win back a great treasure. At the beginning of the journey, the adventure is romanticized. It's fun. It's exciting. But as the months drag on, our heroes struggle. They suffer. They starve. They get their butts kicked over and over again. They lose battles along the way. They forsake comforts and necessities for the hope of a greater reward in the end that will make it all worthwhile. But Bilbo is different from his dwarvish companions. He's not in it for the money. He's not in it for the glory. There's something deeper that drives him. A test of courage. Every other page in the book, Bilbo longs for home. But in spite of his longings, he continues. Every other page, Bilbo is filled with mortal fear, and rightfully so. But in spite of his fear and obvious inadequacies, he persists. There are many proverbs and aphorisms across almost all cultures that are echoed and encapsulated by the words of Shaka Zulu. A boy putting on his armor for war should not speak as a man returning from the battlefield. The ancient Greeks, Chinese, and Hebrews had their own versions of this proverb. Today we might say, "Don't let your mouth write checks that your body can't cash." In Tolkien's novel, we see this aphorism play out. As the tiny hobbit's companions boast and brag and often belittle him throughout their journey, and yet in the end, it was Bilbo, not his companions, who saved their skins time and time again. In the end, it was the meekest among them that went down, down, down into the dark, alone. From the pages of the book, when they reached the edge of the treacherous Mirkwood forest, which they had to pass through before reaching the lonely mountain where the dragon waited, their guide Beorn told them, "Do not stray from the path. That you must not do for any reason. That is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage." They thanked him, of course, with many bows and sweepings of their hoods, and with many an "at your service" or "master of the wide wooden halls," but their spirits sank at his grave words, and they all felt that the adventure was far more dangerous than they had thought. While all the time, even if they passed all the perils of the road, the dragon was waiting at the end. After barely surviving the dangers of the dark enchanted forest and escaping from the dungeons of the wood elves, Bilbo and the dwarves came to the lake town in the shadow of the lonely mountain. Thorin Oakenshield, the de facto leader of the group, celebrates prematurely, while Bilbo cannot help but think of what comes next. Thorin looked and walked as if his kingdom was already regained, and Smaug the dragon chopped up into little pieces. Then, as he had said, the dwarves' good feeling towards the little hobbit grew stronger every day. There were no more groans or grumbles. They drank to his health, and they patted him on the back, and they made a great fuss of him, which was just as well, for he was not feeling particularly cheerful. He had not forgotten the look of the mountain, nor the thought of the dragon. It was a weary journey, and a quiet and stealthy one. There was no laughter or song or sound of hearts, and the pride and hopes which had stirred in their hearts at the singing of all the songs by the lake died away to a plodding gloom. They knew that they were drawing near the end of their journey, and that it might be a very horrible end. The land about them grew bleak and barren, though once, as Thorin told them, it had been green and fair. There was little grass, and before long there was neither bush nor tree, and only broken and black and stumps to speak of ones long vanished. They were come to the desolation of the dragon, and they were come at the waning of the year. When our heroes finally found the secret entrance tunnel to the lonely mountain where the dragon Smaug lay guarding the treasure hoard, the dwarves were afraid to enter, so they looked to Bilbo to do it for them. Bilbo reminded them that he would go, but not out of obligation. After a while, Balin bade Bilbo good luck, and stopped where he could still see the faint line of the door, and by a trick of the echoes of the tunnel hear the rustle and whispering voices of the others just outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than a hobbit's care to make no sound, he crept noiselessly down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had run out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosed his dagger from its sheath, tightened his belt, and went on. "Now you're in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins," he said to himself. "You went and put your foot right in it that night at the party, and now you have got to pull it out and pay for it. Do you hear me? What a fool I was and am," said the least tookish part of him. "I have absolutely no use for dragon-guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever if only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home." He did not wake up, of course, but went still on and on, till all sign of the door behind had faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon, he thought it was beginning to feel warm. "Is that a kind of glow I seem to see coming right ahead down there?" he thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew, till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light, steadily getting redder and redder. Also, it was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up and past him, and he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling, like the noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with a rumble as of a gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt, go on he did, and you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel. Before him lies the great bottommost cellar or dungeon hall of the ancient dwarves, right at the mountain's root. It is almost dark, so that its vastness can only be dimly guessed. But for rising from the nearest side of the rocky floor, there is a great glow, the glow of Smaug. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and rings of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretching away across the unseen floors, Smaug lay, with wings folded like an immeasurable bat. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. Bilbo does not defeat the dragon. Instead, he sets in motion a series of complex events which lead to more battles, more adventures, and the need for more heroes to rise to the occasion, to do the bravest thing they could ever do, to keep walking down, down, down into the dark, when all good sense tells you to quit and go home. Wimps and weaklings who don't know how to fight and don't care to learn often make the mistake of assuming that combat sports athletes such as MMA fighters or boxers are something other than human, that they are unfeeling brute animals with meat for brains, with no inhibitions and no hero's journey to speak of. They tell themselves comforting lies, such as, "They're born that way, you have it or you don't, it's genetic, they only succeed because they take drugs that I don't, because everyone stronger than me is on steroids." Weak people take a call to action as an insult rather than an opportunity. They say things like, "When you grow older, you'll be weak, scared, and sad, just like me. So you might as well be weak, scared, and sad now. You might as well crawl into a hole and give up, because your will to persist frightens me and fills me with regret." The best MMA fighters are not always the best athletes. They aren't always the best technicians. They are the ones who show up. They are the ones who choose to walk down the long tunnel when their mind and body scream, "No!" but their heart says, "I will." Many of the greats of the sport of mixed martial arts have confounded boxing professionals and jiu-jitsu champions who throw their arms up in the air saying, "But how? He's not even that good. But his technique." They are the ones who sign a contract they have no business signing. They set off on an adventure that is at first highly romanticized, but as the grueling months of hard work and hunger stretch on, and the reality of the dragon beneath the shadow of the mountain sets in, the real fight begins, long before anyone steps foot in the cage. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.